Boone Mercer wasn't born under a name. He was found wrapped in a blood-stained saddle blanket on the outskirts of Dry Hollow by a man with 6 fingers and a hollow laugh. That man was Silas Crow, leader of the most feared gang west of the Red Mesa, and he raised Boone like a wolf pup, feeding him grit, gunpowder, and the gospel of survival. By the time Boone turned 25, he'd drawn iron more times than he could count and buried more lawmen than he'd ever admit. Folks said his hands were made for killing. Boone never corrected them. Not because he liked the myth, but because it was simpler than explaining the truth. He didn't know what his hands were made for. The night everything began, the sky over Widow's Valley split open with lightning. Rain hadn't touched that ground in months, and the scent of wet dust rose like a ghost. Boone rode silent, his duster soaked through, hat pulled low. Behind him, 3 other riders moved like shadows. Jeb the Judge, McCrae, Doc Weller, and Annie Grit. They weren't just outlaws. They were family, forged by fire and fugitive blood. But Boone felt the edges fraying. The sheriff's office in Tumblebrush stood alone, lantern flickering behind its rain-streaked window. Inside was a safe with a union payroll, and outside were 2 deputies drinking coffee thick as tar. It should have been clean. Fast. No noise. But when Boone stepped into the glow of the lantern, something in his chest gave a quiet twist. One of the deputies, barely older than a boy, looked up with eyes too green to belong in a fight. Boone saw himself, years back, scared and reaching for anything steady. He hesitated. The first shot came from Jeb. The boy fell with his coffee still steaming. Boone blinked once, then drew and fired, heart heavy. The second deputy crumpled. Silence returned, broken only by the spit of rain and Jeb's chuckle. Still got a soft spot for kittens, Mercer? Jeb holstered his pistol with that damn grin. Boone didn't answer. He just turned away, the iron in his gut growing colder. It was happening more and more lately, these moments of pause, these ghosts that climbed into his saddle and rode behind his eyes. They took the money and rode into the storm. Hours later, with the loot buried under an old cottonwood and the whiskey passed around, Boone sat apart from the fire. Annie sat near the edge, cleaning her rifle, watching him with those unreadable eyes. "You're slipping," she said, not cruel, just factual. "Maybe," Boone muttered. "You slip in front of Silas, he'll cut your legs off and feed him to you." Boone smiled thinly. "Thanks for the imagery." Annie shrugged. "Just paintin' pictures." Doc Weller stumbled over with a bottle, smelling of laudanum and regret. "The boy you hesitated on, what was it? Look like someone?" Boone didn't answer. Doc sighed and plopped beside him. "Hell, Boone. You ever think maybe this life don't fit you no more?" Boone glanced at the fire, remembering a time when it had felt like the only warmth in the world. "I don't know what else there is." Doc patted his shoulder, then promptly fell asleep against a tree. 2 days later, Silas Crow called them into the Red Hollow. It was a dry cut in the earth, hidden by rocks and sagebrush, where their gang had lived in shadows for years. Silas stood at the center of the camp, tall and lean with a mane of silver hair and eyes like sun-bleached bone. His voice carried like thunder. "We got a new job." Everyone fell silent. "Duff Creek. Town's got a fat bank, little law, and a timetable lined up like dominoes." Boone stiffened. Duff Creek. He'd passed through there once on a solo errand for Silas months back. Just a dusty pit stop where he'd intended to change horses and move on. But she had stopped him. He hadn't asked her name then. She'd been kneeling in front of a small grave behind a leaning church, dirt on her hands, hair braided back like she meant to keep the wind out. There was something solemn about her, something clean and still. Not fragile. Not scared. Just real. Boone had only watched her from the road. She never looked up. Silas went on, listing out the plan, timing, exits, who would cover which angle. Boone barely heard him. All he could think of was her, bent over that grave like she was whispering secrets to the dead. "Mercer," Silas barked, snapping him back. "You'll go in first. Scout the land. Map it quiet. You know the place." Boone nodded. His mouth was dry. That night, as the others drank and laughed over the coming score, Boone saddled his horse in silence. Annie appeared at the edge of the hitching post, rifle slung across her back. "Why does Duff Creek bother you?" He met her eyes. "Doesn't." "Liar." He didn't respond. She watched him a moment longer, then walked away without a word. The ride to Duff Creek took 3 days. Boone avoided main roads, camped beneath thorn trees, and listened to the wind talk to the canyons. His thoughts turned over like hot coals. The town hadn't changed much. A few more wagons. A new coat of paint on the saloon. But the church still leaned and the grave still stood, a simple wooden cross at its back. And she was there again. Kneeling. This time planting something. Flowers maybe. Her hands were rough, skin browned by the sun. Not a porcelain doll but a woman made of bark and spine. Boone dismounted and approached. She looked up. "I remember you," she said, brushing dirt from her dress. "You watched me once. Then left. I didn't mean to stare. Didn't bother me. I just wondered if you were ghost or outlaw." Boone smirked, nervous. "Little of both, maybe." She straightened and dusted off her palms. "Maribel Wren." He hesitated. "Boone Mercer." She nodded as if she already knew. They stood in silence, the breeze tugging gently at their clothes. He noticed her hands, strong and scarred, not from combat but from work. A widow, he guessed. No man about. No children laughing behind fences. Just her and that grave. Boone looked down at the marker. "Your husband?" She nodded. "Rider caught in a gang crossfire 2 winters back. Wrong place, wrong moment. Story of the West." "I'm sorry." "You didn't pull the trigger." He didn't answer. Because maybe he had. Maybe one of his bullets had strayed. Maybe his delay had sealed a fate. The guilt didn't care about specifics. She turned to go, then paused. "If you're not just passing through this time, there's coffee at the house." He watched her walk away, unsure why his chest felt like a fist was slowly unclenching inside it. He took her up on the offer that evening. The house was simple, wood creaking under every step, warm light from oil lamps, a kettle hissing on the stove. She poured 2 cups and sat across from him. "You scoutin'?" He froze. "For who?" she added softly. He lied. "Nobody." She didn't believe him but didn't press. They talked instead. About horses, about the way the land breathed at night, about books and river floods and what silence sounds like after grief. And for the first time in years, Boone felt like something more than a gun hand. He laughed once. A real laugh. But it didn't last. When he returned to camp 2 nights later, Silas pulled him aside. "What's the layout?" Boone described it all, bank placement, guard schedule, even the broken wagon that blocked one alley. But he left out the widow. He couldn't bring her into it. Couldn't paint a target on someone who looked at him like he was human. Silas eyed him hard. "Something else on your mind?" Boone met his gaze. "Just tired of ghosts." Silas smiled faintly. "Ain't we all?" As Boone walked away, he caught Annie watching him from the shadows. She looked at him like a woman watching a tree begin to fall, slow, inevitable. Later that night, Jeb nudged him over whiskey. "That widow's a looker. Might pay her a visit after the job." Boone said nothing, but his hand tightened on the bottle. In the darkness of his tent, Boone lay awake listening to the wind. He had a choice, clear as a gun barrel. Stay with the gang and become the shadow he'd always been. Or turn against them, for her, for the boy he'd once been, for the man he didn't know he could be. He closed his eyes. Tomorrow he'd ride for Dove Creek again. But this time it wouldn't be to scout. It would be to save her. Even if it killed him. Boone rode hard through the night, wind slicing his coat and grit biting at his cheeks. He didn't look back, not once. The campfire glow of the outlaw camp faded behind him like a chapter he could no longer reread. Dawn cracked open over the hills, bleeding gold across the sky. Somewhere ahead lay Dove Creek and Maribel Wren. Somewhere behind, a gang of killers led by a man who'd carved Boone from shadow and sharpened him on the bones of others. His horse snorted steam into the crisp air, and Boone leaned forward, whispering encouragement. "Just a little farther, girl." The animal seemed to understand. She pushed harder. He reached the outer hills by midday, cloaking his arrival in silence. The town lay below, dust-choked, sun-baked, and oblivious. Children darted between wagons. The blacksmith hammered with rhythmic fury. Boone saw the saloon doors swing open, heard laughter mixed with out-of-tune piano. Ordinary life ticking forward, unaware of the storm galloping toward it. Boone didn't ride straight in. He skirted the town's edge and tied off in the hills, then approached on foot. He wore his hat low and his coat open, holster loose. Not enough to draw attention, but enough to act fast if he had to. He'd been too long on the other side of this kind of story. Now he was the only warning they weren't expecting. Maribel was outside her house again, hanging laundry on a line that bowed under the weight of the wind. She looked up as he approached, eyes narrowing before recognition softened them. "You came back," she said. Boone nodded. "I had to." She stared at him, reading the tension in his frame, the storm in his eyes. "What is it?" "They're coming." Her hand stopped mid-motion. "Your people?" He hesitated, then nodded. Her expression didn't shift. No panic. No tears. Just stillness. Why? Bank job. Big one. They'll burn the town if it buys them an easier escape. She let the sheet fall, folding her arms. And you came to warn me? You. And the others. She stepped off the porch, closing the space between them. Why now? Boone looked past her, toward the church, the grave, the place she'd planted something in earth made hard by grief. Because I'm tired of being what they made me. She searched his face, then gave a slow nod. Come inside. The house hadn't changed. The warmth, the smell of cinnamon and wood smoke. But Boone noticed things now he hadn't before, how the rifle by the door had been cleaned recently. The way her boots rested beside a bucket of kindling. Quiet preparations for quiet wars. They sat at the table. She poured coffee, strong and black. Boone wrapped his hands around the mug like it was an anchor. When? She asked. 3 days. Maybe 2 if they ride fast. She leaned back. You said they'd burn the town. You think they'll go that far? I know Silas. If the plan cracks, he'll shoot his way out. Doesn't care who's in the crossfire. And you? Boone stared at the steam rising from his cup. I used to think I didn't care either. She stood suddenly and walked to the cupboard. Pulled out a worn map and unrolled it across the table. Then we plan. The sheriff's a coward, but there's a few folk who'll stand if they know it's coming. Boone blinked. You're not leaving? I already buried one life. I won't run from another. A knot tightened in his chest. They'll come looking for me. Then let 'em. He looked at her, seeing not a widow but a storm in her own right. I don't deserve this, he said quietly. She looked back, unflinching. Maybe not. But that doesn't mean you don't fight for it. For the next hour, they studied every street and alley. Boone marked where Jeb liked to post up, high ground, rifle range. Where Doc might place fire, saloon roof, water tower. They counted windows, escape routes, and places to hide women and children. Maribel knew the town better than he ever could. He trusted her like he trusted a loaded gun in his hand. When the planning paused, Boone leaned back, eyes fixed on her. You always this calm during a war? She smiled slightly. You just haven't seen me panic. That night, Boone went into town proper. He wore a neutral face and told no one his name. He spoke to the blacksmith first, a wiry man with an old cavalry saber nailed above his door. Riders coming, Boone said. Dangerous ones. The blacksmith spat in the dirt. Outlaws? Boone nodded. You one of them? Was. The man grunted. All right. You gettin' the sheriff? I'll try. Don't waste too much time. Man's spine was made of wet parchment. Boone moved fast, quiet. A ranch hand agreed to help. So did the owner of the dry goods store. By dusk, a plan had begun to grow, thread by thread. Boone worked through the night, laying the skeleton of resistance. Then came the sheriff. Boone found him at his desk, boots up, reading an old newspaper. They're coming, Boone said. Big gang. Silas Crow. The sheriff didn't even flinch. Heard of him. You should do more than hear. The sheriff yawned. I don't have the men, Mercer. Boone froze. You know me? Whole damn town knows you by now. They just ain't decided what to do with the knowledge. Boone stepped closer. Then you know what they're capable of. If you stand down, they'll gut this town and shoot everyone in their way. And if I stand up, they'll shoot me first. Either way, I end up in the dirt. Boone's jaw tightened. Then get out of the way. The sheriff stared at him a long beat, then nodded. You're in charge now. Boone left without another word. The next morning, he found Maribel hauling crates of dried goods from the store to her wagon. She handed him a rifle without asking. We post lookouts by sundown, she said. And move the children to the root cellar behind the church. Reverends agreed. Boone checked the rifle's chamber, nodded. Good. For 2 days they built a defense. Barricades rose from crates and barrels. Slit windows were carved into walls. Boone taught 3 teenage boys how to aim without shaking, and 2 old miners how to load in the dark. He didn't pretend they'd stop the gang outright, but they'd make it cost. The nights were quiet. Boone slept on the floor near Maribel's door, his revolver always within reach. She didn't ask him to move. In the silence between sleep and dawn, they sometimes talked. He told her about Silas, about the first man he shot, about Annie, and the scar on Jeb's throat Boone had put there after a drunken brawl. She listened without judgment. And in return she told him of her husband, how he used to hum off-key when he worked, how he died with his eyes open. The second night she looked at Boone and said, You're not that boy anymore. I'm still armed like him. But your aim's different. On the third morning, Boone stood on the church roof with a spyglass. Dust curled in the distance, riders fast and mean. "They're here," he said. Maribel stood beside him, rifle in hand. "Then let's meet them." He watched her step down to ready the others, calm and efficient, like a general wrapped in calico and resolve. Boone stayed a moment longer, the wind catching the brim of his hat. As the hoofbeats neared, he felt it, the shift in his blood, the fight-or-flee instinct honed over years. Only this time he wasn't running. And he wasn't fighting to steal or survive. He was fighting for something real. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. He stepped down from the roof and walked into the coming war. The town of Dove Creek held its breath. Boone stood in the middle of Main Street, boots firm in the dust, eyes fixed on the horizon. Behind him, townsfolk crouched behind barricades, rifles shaking in calloused hands. Somewhere in the shadows of a broken feed shed, Maribel watched him with quiet fire in her gaze. The time for waiting had passed. The outlaw riders crested the ridge like a storm front, their silhouettes distorted by heat shimmer. Boone recognized each one. Silas Crow rode at the front, long coat flapping, silver bandolier across his chest like some twisted badge of honor. His beard had grown grayer, but the eyes behind the brim of his hat hadn't softened. They were wolf's eyes, scanning for weakness. Boone knew those eyes. They used to belong to him. The outlaws reined in a quarter-mile out. Dust spiraled around them as they surveyed the fortified town. Silence stretched, taut and dry. Then Silas urged his horse forward alone, his approach deliberate, slow, theatrical. Boone didn't move. He wanted Silas to see him there, to understand. "Well, I'll be damned," Silas called out, voice carrying easy on the wind. Mercer Boone, standing tall in a graveyard. Boone didn't flinch. "You've come far enough." Silas stopped just short of shouting range, cocked his head. "Funny. That almost sounded like a warning." "It is." Silas chuckled, low and cold. "You planning to stop us, Boone? With this gaggle of shopkeepers and milk drinkers? They're good enough. Good enough to die." Boone didn't answer. Silence was better. Let the wind carry the weight. "You always were a romantic fool," Silas said louder now. "I told the boys you'd crawled off and died, heartbroken over a woman you barely knew. I was wrong. You crawled off to become some kind of saint. You came here to take something that doesn't belong to you." "I've been doing that my whole life," Silas said. "And so have you." Boone stepped forward, one slow pace. "Not anymore." That made Silas pause. He blinked once, then gave a slow grin. "So it's like that. You stand between me and the bank and you think I'll back down?" "No," Boone said. "I think you'll try. And I think that's where it ends." Silas turned his horse, casting a long look over the town. "Last chance, Mercer. Step aside. Let me do what I came to do." Boone held his ground. "Not a step." Silas stared at him a long moment, then spat. "You've made your choice. Don't say I didn't give you a chance." He turned and rode back, dust trailing him like a cloak of ghosts. Boone turned toward the makeshift barricades. Every set of eyes was on him, nervous, uncertain, but waiting. "They'll hit fast," Boone said. "Hard. Stay down. Stay calm. Fire when they're close." Maribel moved up beside him, rifle in hand. "How long do we have?" "Not long." He could already hear the faint shuffle of saddles, the tightening of reins. The outlaws regrouped behind the ridge. They weren't built for negotiation. They were built for blood. Boone took a moment, scanned the faces of the people he'd chosen to stand with. Farmers. Tanners. 2 teenagers barely past their first shave. It was madness. And yet, it was the most righteous madness he'd ever known. He looked at Maribel, her jaw set, her grip steady. "If they break through." "They won't," she said. He gave her a long look, then nodded. "All right." Then came the thunder. The outlaws surged down the ridge like a wave of steel and fury. Gunfire erupted before the hooves even hit the flat, wild and erratic. The town roared in response. Rifles cracked from the rooftops. Buckshot burst from the saloon porch. Boone ducked behind a wagon, returned fire, and watched as the chaos swallowed the street. Jeb came in first, just as Boone expected, mounted, dual pistols, teeth bared like a mad dog. Boone fired once and missed, then again. The second shot clipped Jeb's shoulder, spinning him from his horse into the dust. Boone was moving before Jeb even hit the ground. He sprinted across the street, grabbed Jeb's collar, and dragged him behind cover. Jeb coughed blood, looked up, and grinned. "Ain't this a twist, Mercer?" "Could have walked away," Boone muttered. Jeb laughed. "And miss seeing you play hero?" "Hell no." A stray bullet cracked the wagon wheel above them. Boone ducked, heart pounding. Gunpowder filled his nose, acrid and familiar. He peeked out. The outlaws had split, half flanking, half pushing straight up the middle. He shouted to the rooftops. Left side. Watch the alley. A rifle barked from the church roof. One of the riders screamed and tumbled. Then Boone saw him, Silas, weaving between fire, calm as ever. He wasn't shooting yet. He was watching, calculating, waiting for Boone. Boone moved toward him, instinct louder than reason. He dodged between crates and barrels, bullets tearing wood and dirt around him. His boots slammed the porch of the saloon, and then he was across, ducking under shattered windows. He emerged onto the street, just in time to see Silas drop from his horse. The two men stood 10 feet apart, revolvers in hand, the noise of battle suddenly distant. Boone spoke first. Don't do this. Silas shrugged. You're the one pointing a gun at me, friend. This doesn't have to end here. It does, Silas said. And you know it. The silence between them cracked like ice. They both fired. Boone's shot hit first, tearing across Silas's shoulder. Silas's return shot grazed Boone's ribs, white-hot pain slicing through him. Both men staggered, but neither fell. Silas growled and charged. They crashed into each other, fists flying. The revolvers clattered to the dirt. Boone took a punch to the gut, drove a knee into Silas's thigh. They grappled like animals, years of betrayal boiling over. You think you're better than me? Silas spat. No, Boone hissed. But I want to be. He drove his fist into Silas's jaw. The older man crumpled, finally, like a house collapsing. Around them the battle waned. The townsfolk had held. The barricades were still standing. 3 outlaws lay dead in the dust. The rest had fled or been captured. Maribel ran to Boone, rifle still smoking. Her eyes scanned him for wounds. You hit. Ribs? Boone muttered, wincing. Just a scratch. She didn't smile. Just touched his arm. You did it. He looked around. The town stood. People gathered, stunned but alive. Children peeked from hiding places. The storm had passed. Boone turned to the fallen figure of Silas, still breathing but barely. I should kill him, he muttered. Maribel said nothing. Boone holstered his weapon. But I won't. He looked out over Dove Creek, now marked with the scars of war. Smoke curled from rooftops and blood mixed with dust. But it was standing. And so was he. Boone didn't know what came next. But he knew it would be different. Behind him, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows. Ann Mercer Boone, once an outlaw, now a man reborn, stepped into the light. Dove Creek awoke the morning after the battle with an uneasy stillness, the kind that follows a storm but doesn't promise peace. Smoke from burned crates still drifted in the air. Blood streaks stained the dirt road. Yet the town stood, its bones bruised but unbroken. Folks emerged from root cellars and boarded homes, blinking against the sunlight, their expressions suspended between victory and disbelief. Boone stood on the church steps, arms folded, his side wrapped in a strip of white linen that was already beginning to turn red. The ache in his ribs pulsed with every breath, but he hardly noticed. His eyes scanned the faces of those gathering around. The tanner, the schoolteacher, even old Mr. Mallory, who hadn't touched a rifle since the war. All of them had held the line. A small voice broke the silence. Is it over? A boy asked, no more than 8, dirt streaked across his cheek. Boone looked down at him, then out to the horizon. For now. The boy nodded and ran to his mother, who gripped his hand like she might never let go again. Maribel stepped beside Boone, carrying a ledger. 3 wounded, 1 bad. Josiah took a bullet to the thigh. Might limp, but he'll live. Boone nodded. And the others? Buried behind the church. Reverend said prayers at dawn. Boone took a slow breath. The scent of scorched wood and torn earth lingered, stubborn. How many of them did we lose? 4, she said. Silas's gang left 3 dead, 2 captured. The rest rode off before sunrise. They'll be back. Not if word gets out what happened here, Maribel replied. They took a beating. And outlaws don't like being humbled. Boone gave a faint, tired smile. No, they don't. She looked at him, eyes probing. You gonna stay? I don't know. Seems to me you already decided. He met her gaze. There was something in it, no expectation, just recognition. She knew what he carried. And she wasn't asking him to put it down, just to carry it forward. Boone glanced toward the jailhouse. Inside, Silas Crow lay bound and bruised, stripped of weapons and legacy alike. The town had argued about what to do with him. Some wanted justice swift and final. Others feared retaliation from whatever was left of his gang. But Boone had spoken first and last. We do this by the law, he'd said. Or we become them. So they kept him under lock and key, guarded day and night, fed but not spoken to. A ghost behind iron. Boone hadn't yet visited him. Not until now. The cell was dim, bars casting shadows like cage slats across the floor. Silas sat on the cot, wrists bound, his right arm in a sling. He looked older in the light. Smaller, too, as if stripped of violence, he lost inches. "You come to gloat?" Silas asked, voice hoarse. "No," Boone replied. "I came to ask you why." Silas snorted. "Why what? Why the job? Why the fire? Why me?" That made the old outlaw look up. His eyes, once hard and piercing, were now rimmed with fatigue. "You were the best I ever had, Mercer. Fast, smart, unafraid. I brought you in because I thought I could shape you into something great." "You shaped me into a weapon," Boone said. Silas shrugged. "Same thing." Boone stepped closer, voice quiet but sharp. "I could have killed you out there." "I know. But I didn't. I know that too." "Why do you think that is?" Silas smiled bitterly. "Because you fell in love with a widow who reminded you what life looks like." Boone didn't respond. The silence sat thick between them. Silas leaned back. "I always knew you'd leave. Sooner or later. You had too much heart. That used to be a flaw in your eyes." "It still is," Silas said. "Out here, heart gets you killed." Boone looked him over one final time. "Maybe. But it's also what kept this town alive." He turned and walked out, leaving the man who had once been a father, a mentor, a monster. That afternoon, Boone joined the townsfolk as they repaired what had been broken. He helped lift the shattered door from the dry goods store. He hammered planks into the busted water trough. Children followed him like shadows, eyes wide with curiosity. Some called him Mr. Boone. Others just stared. He wasn't used to being seen without suspicion. Maribel brought him water. He drank in silence, sweat dripping down his brow. "You could build something here," she said. "Maybe. You've got the hands for it. I've also got a history. So does this town." He looked at her, eyes softening. "What if they come back? Then we do it again. Stronger." Boone glanced around. People worked with purpose. They weren't afraid now, they were focused. Tougher than the wind and more stubborn than the dust. "I still don't know who I am without them," Boone admitted. Maribel stepped closer. "That's all right. You've got time to find out." Later that evening, the townsfolk gathered in the square. Someone had brought a fiddle. Another had cooked beans over a fire. The air smelled of spice and wood smoke again, and laughter found its way into the cracks. They weren't celebrating a war, they were reclaiming joy from the ashes. Boone stood at the edge of the gathering, leaning against a fence post. He watched them dance and eat, saw hands held and shoulders leaned into one another. Community raw and real. Maribel approached. She wore a clean blouse and her hair pinned up, though a few strands had escaped in the wind. "You're standing like a ghost again," she teased. "Just watching." She handed him a plate. "Then watch with full hands." Boone took the food, the warmth of it grounding him. "You think they'll ever stop seeing me as what I was?" "No," she said. "But they'll see more." He nodded, quietly grateful. The fire crackled beside them. Somewhere a child shrieked with joy. Boone looked up at the stars. Clear. Infinite. He wondered how many nights he'd wasted under them, riding from one crime to the next, pretending the sky wasn't watching. Now it felt like it saw everything, and forgave a little. "You never told me why you stayed," he said to her. Maribel didn't look away. "Because there's no future worth having that doesn't come with risk. And I'm tired of burying mine." Boone smiled, the kind of smile that carried weight and warmth both. "Then I'll stay a while." She nudged his arm. "Good." They stood there for a long time, side by side, watching the town relearn how to breathe. Boone didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in years he wasn't dreading it. He wasn't waiting for a command from a man with cold eyes. He wasn't running from a past that bit at his heels. He was here. And he was becoming something else. Not a hero. Not a saint. Just a man finally choosing his own story. The days following the skirmish in Dove Creek unfolded in a hush that felt more like the inhale before another strike than any true peace. The townspeople had returned to their routines, rebuilding storefronts and fences, tending crops with cautious optimism, but their eyes often drifted to the horizon, waiting. Boone could feel it in the bones of the place, the held breath, the steady thrum of worry that no one dared voice. The outlaws had been beaten, yes, but not destroyed. And Silas Crow still lived. Boone walked with a limp now, his ribs tightly bandaged, each step a dull protest. He didn't mind. Pain had become an old acquaintance, not quite friend but not enemy either. It reminded him he was alive, and changing. He spent his mornings helping Samuel, the old blacksmith, reforge the iron hinges for the general store's door. His afternoons were usually split between repairing the busted rail fences that circled the town and checking the jailhouse, where Silas remained confined. Nights, though, belonged to the quiet. Sometimes to Maribel, sometimes to himself. One evening, while stars bloomed across the sky and the last firelight from the saloon flickered low, Boone heard the faintest sound, a creak of leather, a hoof on gravel. He was already halfway out of his chair when he saw the silhouette, Jonas Wren, second in command to Silas, and far meaner than the man he served. Boone ducked behind a crate, heart hammering. The figure in the street was lean and tall, a rifle strapped across his back. He moved with that predatory calm Boone had known too well. Jonas wasn't here alone. Boone slipped into the shadows, circling toward the sheriff's office. He didn't knock, just eased the door open and whispered to Thomas, the night deputy, "They're here." Thomas's eyes widened. "You sure?" Boone nodded once. "Jonas Wren. At least him. Might be more." Thomas reached for his revolver, face pale but determined. "We wake the others?" "Quietly," Boone said. "Don't spook them. They'll be moving under cover. This ain't a siege, it's a jailbreak." The town had no bell, no alarm. But Boone didn't need one. He moved like shadow and flame, lighting lanterns in homes where he trusted the hands inside. Word passed quietly, quickly. Within 15 minutes, half the town was roused, and the jail was surrounded in near-silent readiness. Maribel appeared beside him, rifle slung across her shoulder, hair tied back. "How many?" "Don't know. But they're not looking to negotiate." "Then we stop them." Boone looked at her, at the fire in her eyes, and felt that rare flash of fear, not for himself but for her. "You stay back." She arched an eyebrow. "Say that again." "You didn't?" Moments later the trap sprang. The explosion came from behind the church, small but sharp. A distraction. Boone didn't fall for it. He spun toward the jailhouse and spotted movement, 2 figures flanking the rear door, another climbing the side to the barred window. Jonas moved like a wolf, fast and deliberate. Boone raised his voice. "Jonas." The outlaw froze, half-shadowed by moonlight. "Well now," Jonas called, voice dry as bone, "ain't this something? The prodigal son playing sheriff. You're not getting him out. I only need 10 seconds. That's all it takes to end this." Boone stepped into the light. "You'll die in 5. Jonas smirked. "That a bet, Mercer?" Boone didn't answer. He fired. The shot clipped Jonas's arm, sent him spinning behind a barrel. Gunfire erupted. From every rooftop and alley the townsfolk answered. The would-be rescuers, no more than 6 total, were caught between cover and open death. 2 dropped within seconds, their bodies crumpling into the dirt. Boone dashed across the street, bullets whizzing past. He hit the jailhouse wall and pressed close. Inside he could hear Silas laughing, a dry, guttural sound that chilled him. "You gonna save me now?" Silas called through the barred window. Boone didn't answer. Instead he peeked around the corner and spotted Jonas again, bleeding, pinned, eyes wild. Boone stepped forward, revolver raised. "Drop it, Wren." Jonas lifted his head, blood soaking his sleeve. "We used to run side by side, Mercer. You really gonna shoot me?" "I already did." "You think this place is worth dying for?" "No," Boone said. "I think it's worth living for." "That's worse, ain't it?" Jonas made one last move, a hand to his belt, knife glinting. Boone shot once, clean. The man dropped without another sound. Gunfire stopped. The silence afterward was thick, sticky. Boone turned, took in the bodies. The townsfolk stepped out of their hiding places slowly, weapons lowered. It was over. Boone stood in the center of the street, chest heaving, heart thudding against broken ribs. Maribel approached, eyes scanning for wounds. "I'm fine," he said. "You always say that." This time he meant it. They moved toward the jailhouse. Inside, Silas leaned against the wall, grinning through bloodied lips. "Well," he rasped, "that was foolish." Boone stared at him. "They're dead, Silas. All of them. No more gang. No more name. You think that makes you clean?" "No. But it makes me free." Silas tilted his head. "You always had it backwards. You wanted to belong. But you weren't made for chains." "I was made for choices," Boone replied. "And I've made mine." Silas's smile faded, replaced by something quieter. "You really gonna keep me locked up? Let the law hang me?" "No," Boone said. "You're going to Yuma prison. Trial, transport, all of it. That place'll kill me." That's between you and the law. Silas leaned his head back, stared at the ceiling. You were my best mistake. Boone turned away. You were mine. He stepped into the dawn. The first light of morning painted the town gold and pink. Smoke curled from chimneys. The ground, still marked with blood, somehow felt cleaner than ever before. The townsfolk gathered in the square. Murmurs floated between them, words of relief, admiration, a few calling Boone by name. He didn't bask in it, just stood beside them, silent and sure. Maribel came to his side. You did it. We did it. Her hand brushed his. You staying? I'm not going anywhere. And just like that, the waiting ended. The town exhaled. Life resumed, not with fanfare but with purpose. Mercer Boone, once an outlaw raised in fire and blood, stood among them not as a hero, not as a sheriff, but as a man finally free from the weight of who he'd been. The West didn't forget. But sometimes if you fought hard enough, it forgave.